Hazel is broken. Finally happened. No thanks to Tim. Hazel's broken. So a couple of weeks ago I made a video called Just a Chill Devlog. And to my surprise, a lot of you seemed to like it. It was just a very chill video. I just hit record, and that's something that honestly I have vowed to do more of. So hopefully this is kind of a continuation of that format. I'm just going to put in more of an effort to document the kind of work we do here at Studio Cherno. So in that chill devlog video, I mentioned that Hazel is kind of a little bit broken right now. The quality of the main release kind of branch is not very good. And I wanted to make an effort to try and improve that quality and make it a little bit better. So rather than just doing it magically behind the scenes, I'm going to show you all of the work that goes into doing something like that. What do I mean by how am I going to improve the quality? What are the processes that we're going to implement as part of our development cycle, and literally what is going to happen? So that's what we're here for today. We're going to fix Hazel together. I'm going to document the process of doing this. I'm probably not going to do this in one sitting. I'm just going to film throughout the week, and hopefully this will be more of a devlog kind of devlog where I kind of check in maybe every day and show you kind of what's changed, as well as probably I'll try and include some of the work. Obviously can't include all of it because it's going to be just too much, but I'm going to try and include some of the work here and there so you see some real work, not just updates of me being yeah, so I've done this, and whatever. I don't know, devlogs are weird. So over here in our master branch, we've kind of got a master branch and then a dev branch. A dev branch is where all of the other feature branches get merged into, and then master kind of acts as a release branch, and it's a default branch of the repository. I'm really contemplating kind of renaming maybe master to release because that would make more sense. But anyway, the last commit there was 15th of June, which is almost a month ago. Today's the 11th of July. So, and the reason for that is because in that previous chill devlog I mentioned that I locked master. No one can push to master except for me, and I obviously haven't pushed anything to master, and the idea is it's our release branch. It's kind of locked in, no more features, no more weird code going in there. It's all kind of tightly controlled so that we can make sure that master kind of represents a fully QA tested final product, if that makes sense, of a given version of Hazel. And so we have another branch called dev, which, as I mentioned, is where all of the other people that work on the team, they merge their feature branches into dev. And if there are small fixes or small little features, you can just add them directly into dev. That's fine, which is how master was treated before, which, as you can imagine, is a bit of a problem since master was that first branch that everyone sees. And so if someone just pushes some code that maybe isn't fully tested, it could break just everyone's version of Hazel basically as soon as they pull. So I want to have that master be a little bit more controlled. So because master is quite old at this point in time, it's a month old, and also dev, dev is the version I've more or less been using. So in the previous version of my ray tracing series, which I'll leave up there, I actually used Hazel to visualize rays being shot out from the camera to explain how ray casting and ray tracing works, and that was off of dev, right? So it is stable. The idea is it should be fairly stable, but it's just not as fully tested because obviously in a game engine, there's a lot of features, and testing every single one of those features every time is a little bit of a pain. And so whilst dev is more or less stable, it's still not we can't guarantee that everything works. That's what master is for. So what I'm going to do as step one here is basically just merge dev into master. But I don't really, so normally the way we would do this is a little bit more stable than that. We don't want to merge dev into master, because if we do that, then whilst QA kind of goes in and tries to make sure everything is good, and QA is just us, we don't really have a dedicated QA team or anything like that. But anyway, once the QA pass kind of happens, while it's going on, obviously you've just pushed a commit to master that is untested. And so therefore master is now unstable. So instead of doing that, you probably want to make another branch called master release or master temp or whatever you want to call it. Maybe dev master. I don't know. I don't want to get too confusing with names here. But basically the idea is you make another branch which kind of will be your QA testing branch. And as that gets tested and as potential fixes get pushed into that branch, you keep master at its previous release so that it's all still stable. And then once that's done, you just basically replace the master branch with that branch. So you can just like fast forward or just merge or whatever. Now, the reason why you can't simply have QA test dev is because obviously other people on the team are going to continue committing to dev, right? If you have a team and you're not just a solo developer, then there's going to be other people merging their feature branches in, other people adding little features to dev. You know, dev is like the main kind of working branch. And so we can't just get QA to test that, because, I mean, we could get QA to test a particular commit in the dev branch, but that complicates the fix process, because we need to apply fixes to just that commit. Because obviously any more kind of new commits that have come in, they're not tested anymore. And so it's just easier to just make a branch. So I'll probably make a branch called release for now. And that's going to act as like our kind of the branch that we send to QA. They will test that. Fixes will be implemented into release. Release will be branched off of dev. So that way any fixes that go into release, they'll simply be pulled back into dev as well. So dev will get them, and then master will essentially be replaced by the final kind of everything's fixed and tested version of the release branch. And then you could just delete release. I mean, I might call it something like release pending or something. Maybe that would make more sense, because the idea is obviously like it does get published into that master branch, which I might rename to release. Anyway, lots of names, lots of release, lots of master, lots of dev going on. Not enough work, so let's get into it. So Tim's been working on a scene actually in Hazel. Now, what branch are you off?
This is dev.
This is dev. Yeah. Okay, cool. So this is the dev branch, right? It's pretty stable. Can you play that again? I'm sure that duck. That's cute. So yeah, we've been doing some animation work, and there'll probably be a devlog specifically about that a little bit later. So Tim has been putting together this scene that highlights animation. It's why the trees are moving and everything's kind of cool. But in general, Tim, what would you say has been your experience working with Hazel in terms of like stability and stuff?
Honest answer.
Yeah.
It's been a bit of a give and take, to say the least. Like, yeah, sometimes there's been stuff that has been working for months and then just all of a sudden just stops working.
Yeah.
Which usually those features get back up and running within a day or so, but yeah, like it's sometimes you're very used to something working and then you know that workflow, and then you kind of have to invent a new workflow because all of a sudden that doesn't work.
That's what Tim does. Instead of telling the rest of the team, hey, this is broken, Tim like invents new workflow.
No. I tell the team like, hey, this doesn't work anymore, and then I'm like, well, can I actually work on what I was working without waiting for this feature to get fixed?
Yeah.
By Sweden or Stockholm time.
By Sweden.
By Stockholm.
Yeah, we don't call Peter anymore. We just call him Sweden.
Sweden. The Sweden branch of Hazel development.
I guess the other thing is that, like, as Hazel grows, obviously, people might not even be aware of all of the features there, and so Tim's primary job is to use Hazel. And he should be fairly aware of all of the features, and obviously he uses Hazel to a much greater extent than any of the other developers on the team.
Mm-hmm.
And so someone can come along and commit something, and you know, their stuff might work, and their understanding of Hazel might work, but Tim might be using a feature that they're not even aware of, and that's where the breakage can happen as well.
Yeah, but I also feel like a lot of this stuff is, like, on repositories that people have access to on the team, so, like, I feel like a lot of the time that they just don't open up, like, Space Invaders, for example.
Yes, yeah.
And that's why, like, I open it up because I might need something or need to double-check something, like, and then it's like, hey, this doesn't actually work, or this crashes on play or something.
Yeah, that's a good point. I might ask how many people on the team actually test Hazel with the games that we've made.
Yeah.
Because that's obviously important.
Well, and it's also just a good use case of, like, a bunch of different systems come into play in a finished product, so I think it's just a good idea to run those at least.
Yeah, I agree. We've got this dev master directory, which is the master branch, and then we have dev. I used to prefix all the kind of branches of Hazel with dev just in my local directories, because we used to have Hazel dev, right? There was Hazel, which is now Hazel 2D, and then real big boy Hazel, which used to be called Hazel dev. That's why. So it's a bit confusing now to rename that. But anyway, dev master is master. You can see it's the master branch. And yeah, as I was saying, it's 15th of June, right? So 15th of June, is quite a while ago. And then we have 11th of July, actually, which is today, and that is the dev branch. And you can see there's been quite a lot of work. If we just scroll down through this, I'm regretting my face cam placement, but this should be visible. So if we scroll down from 11th of July, you can get an idea as to how much work goes into Hazel. So 15th of June is all the way back here. This is basically all the stuff that all the way down to here is what needs to be merged into master. And if we clear like the filter of branches, because that was just the dev branch, right? You can see people have other branches as well. We need to take all this new stuff and merge it into master, or an intermediate branch, before it actually hits master. The problem with that, and one of the complications to consider, is like, what is the divergence between master and dev? And the answer is there should be none. If everything is done correctly, there should be none. And I believe there is none, because if we take a look at this, so master is red. It can be a little bit difficult to read these kinds of, maybe I'll make it bigger. It can be a little bit difficult to read these kinds of, trees and all these diagrams that you get when using Git. So I'll hopefully kind of explain that a little bit here, and maybe that'll help you out. But basically, you can see there's a dot here. And this dot is kind of on this red path. And red is kind of master. Now, this red is also a branch, but it's the sound graph branch. So I don't know, sometimes it picks weird colors. I don't entirely understand why that's the case. But basically, these colors represent branches. So you can see if I scroll up all the way up to the top, we have this dev branch, for example. We have this like ragdolls branch, which is yellow, right? This one's orange. And then the master was red. So if we go down and we find master, we can see that, this commit here, because this is shown kind of in like a linear fashion. It's shown in order of like the timestamp. It's sorted by time. And so that's why you have to be like, okay, well, what branch is, for example, this commit on? And you can see it's on the master branch because there's a little dot here on this red thing. So this commit only applies to master. So that's why I like to usually filter by active branch in fork, because otherwise, as you can imagine, it's very difficult to see what actually like makes it into what branch, and especially when people diverge and stuff like that. The reason why this is even shown here, though, is because this actually eventually, this commit gets merged, as you can see, into this orange branch. So orange is dev, and you can see this kind of red line here, it goes into here, and this is the merge branch master into scripting supposedly, but really it's also going into dev. So this was kind of the merge master into scripting as it was back then, because you can also see this is a scripting branch, but it's because like scripting was then merged kind of into dev was renamed. There's been a bunch of stuff that's happened, and so dev is kind of now the scripting branch. So yeah, this stuff can be very complicated. My point here is that master, you can see, has been merged into what is now the dev branch. That's why like all of these commits are also relevant to dev. But otherwise, if we take a look at the rest of master, and you can see that kind of terminates here. So here in this one, this is the one with master actually checked out. You can see it only if I clear the filter. It's kind of red here now. And it's the active kind of commit, and that's all that's happened. And if I kind of filter it by active branch, you can see this now shows you what the repository is like based on this branch. But anyway, so back here, the reason why this is important and we want to look at this stuff is because we need to have an understanding of everything that's gone into this branch and if it differs from dev. So the fact that this has been merged into dev is good. That's kind of the correct procedure. And then now what I'm hoping for is no more commits into master. And we know that there are no more commits, because if I fetch, you can see we have this little GitLab logo, which tells us what is on the origin. So we can talk about remotes as well. There's going to be a Git tutorial, but remotes basically are the remote copies of the repositories. So it's basically like servers that are hosting your repository. You can have multiple, obviously, like you might push your repository to GitHub and GitLab. If you wanted to, you could partially push certain branches to certain repositories. You can keep other branches private and not push them into like a public repository. But if we just edit this, for example, you can see that this origin, the origin is just a name. I don't know why it's called origin, I guess because it's kind of like the host. But you can see that it's pointing towards the main kind of Hazel Dev repository, which is the one that's accessible by patrons. So anyway, because I've just fetched to make sure that I actually have everything downloaded from the server, all the information, and the fact that we have this origin master here, it tells me that the version on the server is this kind of 0A6190C checkout. And then also locally, I'm also, like, my master branch is on this as well, so I don't have any local commits or anything like that. So this is the final kind of master version, and that's really important because, again, it got merged into dev. The reason why this is important is because it tells me that there haven't been any additional fixes that might have gone into master. This could have happened if there were like some emergency things that are like, oh no, this like crashes or whatever, let's quickly patch that up, and maybe those fixes haven't been pulled back into dev. And that's important because I'm about to go through a different kind of release workflow here. So as I mentioned earlier, this is kind of the stage where I want to be able to test everything that we have in dev. I've now made sure that we don't have anything extra in master. Everything that is in master is also in dev now, and that's important to make sure because we don't want to lose work. And also we want to make sure that everything is tested. So now the thing to avoid is other people pushing to dev. So I've decided that this kind of commit over here is the one that we're essentially going to publish. And so this is going to go into our release thing. So there's a few ways we could deal with this. I think what I'm going to do is probably just like create a new branch out of this, and I'm going to call this release pending, as I mentioned earlier, because I think a master will be eventually called release. So I can create and check out, make sure it's on this, and then if I want to, I can push just to create this kind of release pending tracking reference on the actual origin like server, so that this is now like an official branch that people can access. So now release pending is a real branch. You can see that it is in fact like in the GitLab, and that's obviously important because we want everyone to be able to access this. And really all it is at the moment is just like a little pointer into this specific commit on dev. But that obviously means that now the rest of the team can continue committing to dev, merging their features in, fixing stuff, adding little features, doing whatever they would do on the dev branch. And meanwhile, QA can kind of focus on release pending. So as a little side note, you may have noticed all of this like clutter that's just chilling like behind me in the videos for like the last month. And I know some people were being like, what's going on with this? Like, why is this here? And it's a funny story that I thought I should tell. So basically, I had the great idea of setting up a NAS in the office. Because a NAS is like, basically it's a hard drive that's hooked up to like the network, or a series of hard drives. So we wanted some storage that was network attached. The reason being that obviously Tim and I work here, he wants to share assets with me. We've been kind of just dropping it onto each other's computers, just using like the normal Windows 10, like, you know, network sharing, whatever system, which is not bad. But then we also kind of wanted Peter to be able to access it from Sweden. And so it made sense to kind of set up a little server that would basically be like a NAS that we could just access from anywhere. And I was going to buy a NAS, but then Linus Tech Tips is like, no, don't buy a NAS. You can build your own for less. And that was a good suggestion. I mean, honestly, it was a good suggestion. You can see how it worked out, though. But anyway, it was a good suggestion. If I bought a NAS, we'd probably have a NAS, let's be honest.
Let's be honest.
Anyway, it was a good suggestion. Because, like, for the price, way cheaper, you know, and better, I guess, to build your own. Because you could just select much higher quality components. You know, you can have way more RAM, you can upgrade it as you see fit, and it comes out to being like almost the same price as like a higher end kind of NAS. And so, not like an enterprise NAS, but like a higher end, like normal kind of small scale NAS. And so, the problem though here is, it worked for like a week and everything was great. Yeah, I was just like putting files on. I only bought like a single 8 terabyte drive for now. I was gonna upgrade it, maybe run it in like RAID 0 or 5 or whatever. But then it stopped working. It just didn't like boot up, and it was a bit weird. But luckily, the CPU I had selected was Ryzen 5 5600G. That's going to be important later. So this has a graphics processor, like it's got integrated graphics built into it. And the reason why I wanted that is because obviously, like, you know, we're not putting a GPU into this, but I wanted to be able to, like, you know, hook up a monitor to the system to like set up TrueNAS, which is what we ended up using as the operating system, and just, you know, debug it and do whatever, right? Anyway, long story short, we connected the display, like nothing works. It doesn't post, it seems. It doesn't get any video output. So like, maybe something's broken. I thought it was the motherboard. I don't know why, I just thought maybe it's the motherboard. You know, we tried obviously removing RAM and doing all this stuff. Then we put the CPU into Tim's computer. I just took Tim's computer apart and I was like, okay, let's just chuck in the 5600G, you know, into there to see if we get anything. And meanwhile, we got I don't know what CPU do you have? Alright, so Tim actually has a 5600X. So it's the same as this, but the G is the graphics version. So this one has an integrated graphics chip, that one does not. So we chucked Tim's 5600X into this motherboard, and then also took it out of the case so that we could connect like a GPU to it to get like some kind of video output. And yeah, it worked. Meanwhile, this guy, the 5600G, inside Tim's computer does not post. With the GPU, without the GPU, I mean, it's got integrated, so it should work. But yeah, this does not work. What are the odds the CPU died? Same symptoms.
But it could be just the graphical side of the CPU, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. GPU's gone back in then.
Will it be able to pick a GPU on the fly like that?
Well, what do you mean? The video output is plugged directly into the GPU.
Yeah, sure, okay. Nothing. Damn, Jan, look at that. You were wrong.
What do you mean? You went with motherboard.
Yeah, but so did you?
That's true. So that motherboard's fine.
Let's chuck my CPU into this motherboard.
Alright.
Now, the other theory, Jan, because it did not follow all the necessary
Okay,
ethics,
check the
right?
pins.
You
Again,
could have
it
fried
did
the
work.
CPU just then because it didn't have a cooler attached.
Yeah, likely.
Very.
We're gonna start your CPU without a cooler and see what it
No, Jan, please don't. You fried the CPU, Jan. Wait, it's there.
Okay, it's there.
Took a while.
See?
Because it's like, what are you doing? You're cooking me alive.
New CPU installed, sure. Now I want to see the temp. We're just gonna run this for a while. 80 degrees!
Yes, Jan,
Damn,
I'm
that
telling
is
you,
fast.
it heats up like this.
Look, 83.
It heats
84.
up like this. A
Damn,
minute
that
and it's
is-
cooking.
That is quick.
A minute and it's cooking.
Nah, 84 though.
I can't believe you said 10 minutes without a CPU.
No, well 84. 105 is like the max recommended temperature.
Yeah, but you're also not doing anything. Like
Well,
the
yeah,
computer
well, I
genuinely
know.
is not doing
Well, I'm not
anything.
saying let's like run the NAS without a cooler. I'm just saying, whoop, 85. Alright, I'm killing it.
That was like genuinely that was
That
less
was a
than
few.
60
That was a
seconds.
few minutes. Yeah.
That was less than 60 seconds.
That was quick. Here we go. Here's a 90-degree CPU. Careful, it's hot. Generally.
Genuinely, as we found out,
Yeah. See, this one wasn't when I unplugged it for the record.
it was warm.
Yeah, but not as hot as that.
Yeah, but
So
also
clearly
because it
we
never
get-
actually ran, I guess.
Well, exactly, because it's a pile of garbage.
Holy smokes, it's actually so hot.
Oh no, the cops found out.
That
I
young
was
ran a
abusing-
CPU without a cooler.
Abusing CPUs. Yep. Wax. Alright. Guess it's not the motherboard.
So Jan, what's going on? What is actually
First of
happening
all,
here?
the CPU fan is in fact working, and your CPU is just 33 degrees. Well, anyway, turns out that the AMD 5600G CPU does not work, and it looks like the BIOS supports it. Oh, we can verify the BIOS. F15, yeah, that's why I flashed it to you yesterday. Actually, yeah, F15, and it's there, which is supported, which does support the 5600G, and yet the CPU is broken. Don't know why. It worked fine for like a week or two, and then suddenly, boom.
When you decided to copy 1 terabyte of data, it was like, hold up,
how dare
buddy.
How dare an 8-core CPU or a 6-core CPU handle a terabyte of data? That's just too much, and decompress it on the fly. Oof. So, conclusion to this very long story is this CPU does not work anymore, but it worked for like a week. So I have been trying to contact AMD to get like this fixed, and that's a story in and of itself, because what happened was I contacted them, and then like 2 days later got sick with COVID, so I had to stay at home. And meanwhile AMD were like, oh yeah, hey, we're happy to help, just send like absolutely like a photo from every angle of the CPU. I want it installed in the motherboard. I want it installed not in the motherboard. Basically they just wanted like, does it have scratches? Does it? And I'm like, no guys, like it just doesn't post anymore. And it's been sitting there. It's clearly like brand new. It's like a week old. But anyway, whatever. So I didn't send any of those photos because I was at home, and they only gave like I think a week or 10 days or something for until they auto closed the ticket. So that support ticket got closed, and we're stuck here again. So I'm gonna have to open another one and provide them with like some kind of 3D photo scan of this CPU so that they can see that it's not damaged, and then maybe we'll get a replacement or something, and I'll have to mail this to them, I guess, and then we'll have a NAS. So that is the road to NAS story.
So most people thought that would be a bad idea. May 12th. See, that's how long ago this whole debacle was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hashtag no NAS life.